Hello, everyone. This is the Enigma podcast for this week. It's a really good day today, and I'm really happy to announce that with me is the one and only horror legend, Mr. Bill Oberst Jr. Bill, thank you so much again for being a part of this. And I think we were having this conversation about Hammer earlier this year. You saw all these movies in the movie theater. How was it like?
I wasn't old enough to see the movies. I saw them first on television. So I came up in the period between the end of the late night horror host, who used to show all of the late night stuff. That was just before my time. And then I came up before VCRs. So the only way to see these films were if you happen to be in a big city, which I wasn't, in a revival house. So what I did, particularly for Dracula, for Frankenstein, for lycanthropy, all of which I was really interested in, thanks to Famous Monsters magazine, I couldn't see the movies. They weren't running on television. There was no VCRs yet. So I went back to the literary sources. So I read Dracula. I think I was like 12 when I read Dracula. It's a really tough read for a 12-year-old. There's like 1894. But I encourage people to go back to the literary roots of all of these things. It's easy to get caught up in the movies and their mythology, but it strips away so much crap if you go back to the literary roots and see where this was coming from. And even deeper, further back, I brought a book. I have a prop. This is a little book. God, I've had this since I was 14. It's called The Vampire, His Kith and Kin. And it's by Augustus Summers. You can get it really cheap online. Augustus Summers was nuts, but also a genius. So like this is written in 1928. In the early 20th century, he was walking around dressed like an 18th century cleric. He claimed to be a priest, but nobody ever got any record of him being ordained. But he was the number one authority of the time on ancient history of vampires and werewolves. So in this book, he goes back to ancient Greece, to Africa, to Macedonia, where vampires were called the Vikrolocus, to Bulgaria, where they were known as the Upios. And he has multiple accounts, real life accounts of people's what they thought were encounters with the undead. So this was the stuff, the source material that Stoker was dealing with when he wrote Dracula, which is, it's pretty thick, but I would encourage people also to go through this. These two books together give you an idea of what Hammer was trying to do when they started this cycle of films. Lugosi's looks like a stage play because it was adapted from a popular stage play. Lugosi played Dracula on Broadway. And the show had been touring with Bram Stoker's and then his widow's consent since the late 1890s. So it was a very popular stage play that many people in America had seen. And Universal pretty much just filmed the stage play. And so Hammer's task was to reinvigorate the Dracula legend. And so how are they going to do that? You can't go Lugosi. It's like trying to do Freddy Krueger again, right? If you go, because Jackie Earle Haley caught hell from both sides. If you're too much like Robert Englund, you just copy. If you're too different, which happened with Hammer's Frankenstein films, then people are like, oh my God, this isn't anything like it. It's a really tough nut to crack. So I'm almost finished, I promise. I got into monsters and particularly vampires because I felt like a monster when I was a kid. And as I've grown, these interests have grown along with me, and particularly vampirism. I see a lot in our modern culture. Age and the way age is perceived is one example of modern day vampirism. There's an anathema in our culture to saying, I'm 60 years old. And nobody wants to say that or be that. And so people of my age will they'll surround themselves with young people and dress and look like the young people and try to use the products, to make everything go. It's vampiric. It's sucking youthful energy when what you should be doing is providing elder wisdom and accepting your place, hopefully a revered place, you know? and then and then secondly, I got into vampires because my faith is I follow Jesus. I hate the word Christianity because it's been bastardized so much.
Mhm.
But what that's about, and the cross, the reason that the cross was to the vampire was because that symbol represents self-sacrifice, suffering, and the pathos of death, of accepting death on behalf of someone else. And that's the opposite of what the vampire represents. The vampire represents power. I want power, and I want power so much that I am not willing even to join the rest of humanity and die. I'll do anything to keep the power. And I don't care who I hurt, and I don't care what it cost me. I must be dominant all the time. That's what the vampire myth began as. Because Dracula in the book, he's not really this erotic seducer, which plays really well for movies, because it's the man-woman thing. But in the book, he's just a power whore is the only way I can put it. He doesn't really care if you're male or female or what he will dominate you any way he can dominate you just to show that he can.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry it went on so long, but I get passionate about this stuff. So that kind of sets the table for what was happening in the culture in 58 when Hammer decides to start the Dracula films again. It's poetry and metaphor. That's what horror should be, but we've gotten so damn literal that we don't I don't think we feel it anymore.
Yeah.
I don't think we really feel it. It all goes back to the fear of death, but it's poetry. That's the only way I can put it. And that's what I love about Hammer, and particularly that 58 Hammer Dracula, how they put the poetry back in it.
Which is really interesting because when they released it in the UK, it was just called Dracula. It was the British counterpart, or like the British contemporary of the Bela Lugosi version. And I think this one was more celebrated at that time because this was the first time you were seeing Dracula in color. Because you see that one scene when Dracula comes in, the introductory shot of Dracula, of course, that's the one where he's standing above the castle and he first meets Jonathan Harker. But then there's the scene where when we see his fang for the first time, you see the blood and the gore. Throughout the years, I feel like I've met so many people that tell me that they've seen that image of Christopher Lee, but they think it's just like some Dracula movie. It's like, so I'm just like, for the passionate Hammer fan I am, I always like to give him some context that, okay, so this is Horror of Dracula. And I was growing up in India, so this was all like Hollywood for me. Nobody knew, okay, this is a British film, or this is a proper Hollywood film. As we kind of grew older, we kind of got the gist of it, and we got to know there's Hammer and there's Amicus, and there were all these big studios who were making like really fantastic horror cinema at that point at like peanuts worth of budget when you really think about it. And I think this Dracula, Christopher Lee's version, has been particularly popular in Asia and you talk about like just like all over Europe, or like just world over, because this was the first time we were seeing him in color. A lot of the films that kind of followed, especially Dracula AD 1972, you can see this film being, or the poster of it being shown in like so many video commercials, like all these Asian countries and everything, for whatever reason. Or it's like if somebody's making even a funny commercial. I remember back in the day there was a Domino's commercial that was really popular in Asia, and it had the Dracula. It was like Dracula eats pizzas instead of blood or something like that. I don't know the exact context or whatnot, but that Dracula was Christopher Lee's version of Dracula, where they kind of picked that up from. It was not Bela Lugosi. So coming from like a certain like a regional perspective, or from like an international perspective, I feel the Christopher Lee Dracula is definitely more popular than Bela Lugosi on an international and global scale. But then when you talk about like the core American cinema. When you talk about like the core sort of, Universal monsters, when you come to the US, you kind of realize that they are sort of more um, um, dominant in the culture, and understandably so, because of course these were the these were like pretty much the sparks that lit the big fire for horror films back in the day. And but definitely, I think having the whole color element definitely added like that additional dimension to these, yeah, to the Hammer films. But
Yeah, and there,
yeah.
I think the look of the Hammer films. There's a Boris Karloff film. It's from '44, and the name of it escapes me. It was meant to be a sequel to the Phantom of the Opera. It was actually shot on that Universal Phantom stage, and it was meant to be a sequel to the Frederick Mark version of Phantom of the Opera that had been done earlier. Anyway, the offense, the something. Karloff is he's like a maestro of the operatic theater, and there's a woman there who looks a lot like a woman that he strangled years before. But it's lush, it's
Uh-huh.
rich,
Hmm.
um, it has that deep, deep color palette that the Hammer films, particularly the early ones, had.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and that's what that first Hammer film reminds me of. That first Dracula film. Let's go through the series. I'd like to
Yes,
hear
let's
what you
do
think
that.
about them.
So the first
Yes.
one was horror. Was Dracula, as we spoke about it before, but then it got so popular in the UK that they released it in the US, and they had a massive, massive premiere in the US where you saw Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing in New York, and I forgot the name of the movie theater. But then there was a massive re-release in the US, and it was titled Horror of Dracula. So that was the first film in the series, and the next film was actually Brides of Dracula, which was. Dracula is not in the movie. You have Dracula in the title, but he's not in the movie. It's a disciple of Dracula who's also a vampire, but we don't really see Dracula because he's like technically dead. But then we do see Peter Cushing again, and I think it's the last we see of him in the Victorian era of this universe. Or I think because the next one is like 1972 AD, 1972 movie. But then there's this Brides of Dracula movie, and then you see like the resurrection of Christopher Lee in Dracula Prince of Darkness. And being from like overseas, it's like as a kid, who was obsessed with these movies, they never used to show these kind of movies like in certain regions, right? Because of the just like the gruesome nature. But then it was so difficult for me to, get a hold of these DVDs and everything like that. I had to especially order them, or like people I knew overseas to like, have somebody send that to me. And it took like months and months, or sometimes even maybe a year or two for this movie to come. And I remember that the day I got this DVD, I was like so happy. I was like the happiest person in the world. And I saw this movie and I was like, oh my God, this is literally the best Dracula movie ever. I enjoyed the movie thoroughly. I thought this was Christopher Lee's best performance, but I think it's only maybe 2, 3 years later I realized, oh, he doesn't really have any dialogue in the movie.
So I want to ask you about that because I heard an interview that Lee did where he said that he preferred Dracula not to talk. And I think in that one, yeah, he just snarled and grunted.
Hmm.
What is your preference as to his vampire speaking or not speaking?
Christopher Lee's a phenomenal actor. Um, Irrespective of like, him doing the dialogues and not doing the dialogues. I remember he does have a bunch of dialogues and a bunch of the OG Bram Stoker dialogues in Scars of Dracula, which is I think that the only one movie, and we'll come to that, but I think that's the only one movie when we actually see him like having like proper dialogues and proper dialogue delivery. And although I think it's one of the weakest of the series, but it's still fun for me. I love it. But I think Christopher Lee considered it to be like his best performance as Dracula because he actually got to speak. And I forgot the controversy, or like for whatever reason, it's like they did not have the dialogues. I don't remember exactly why was that, and like and
He said,
hmm.
Lee said that the dialogue was insipid and ridiculous, and he said he wouldn't speak it. The
Yeah.
screenwriter said I didn't write him any dialogue, so I don't know. Um, it's an interesting thing whether monsters should speak or not. I know in my own roles, I play monsters, humans all the time, and I don't like them to speak a lot. I
Yeah.
like a few words, not too loquacious. The less, the better. Frankenstein's monster, I thought, should never have spoken. Karloff didn't like him speaking.
Yeah.
And in the first film, the moment of that first film, which is pretty lousy technically, but that there's that one emotional moment where Dr. Frankenstein says, sit down, and makes him sit down. And then they open the skylight and the light comes in. And Karloff just looks up as this horrible face, like a child who's seen the light for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And then they shut the light off, and you just see it in his face that it's gone, and there was no word spoken. And it's, to me, it's better than anything in the film. Also silent is the moment where he picks up the girl and throws her in the lake. So I kind of dig Lee when he's just
Silent.
snarling. I like it.
I mean, definitely, I think that adds like the mysticism aspect to like his character, and like, I never really noticed if he actually had any dialogues or like he didn't have any dialogues, but he's an intimidating person on screen, just putting it simply, and the way he kind of carried himself without even any dialogue, because you do see like now looking back, you see the 31 Dracula and Lugosi. I mean, at that point he did. I mean, he's definitely an iconic Dracula for sure, but then somebody of my time would say that, oh, some of the stuff is so cheesy. It's like
it was cheesy then.
Yeah,
even
it was.
Then it was considered cheesy. Like, there's no reason for Dracula to be in evening clothes.
Yeah.
Stoker's novel says that he's a European count, and in the 30s, that would have meant, oh well, then he wears opera clothes, and and that it got into this horrible stereotype of the bow tie and the and the cape, which I'm wearing now, and
Lee release.
So when they had to make his look, I thought they struck it in the middle pretty good. He still has the cape, but you almost have to have the cape because you're bat-like and something needs to be moving and swirling.
Yeah.
But everything else I think was black, and I thought it worked really well. Man, I just love the ending moment before his death in the original 58 Hammer Dracula, when he comes across that flies across that room. That's the energy that we had never seen before. It was like seeing a fast zombie for the first time.
I think it was like too brutal for its time too. I feel it's like, because it was like a literal body decapitating in front of on the screen, and like slowly sort of turning to dust, and like it's becoming a zombie and all that stuff. It's like, it was interesting. Yeah. But I do feel it's so iconic that I think it inspired the ending of Gremlins as well. If you remember that, because Gremlins had the same ending.
I hadn't thought about that. They did have the same ending. So I want to touch on Peter Cushing, who's undervalued, I think, as a horror icon.
Yeah.
He was in a bunch of stuff, wasn't he?
He's a phenomenal actor. And when they put it out that for Star Wars, for the Rogue One movie, that they're gonna bring him back digitally and like have somebody be like, they're gonna CG his face and everything, and when they did it, it looks so bad. To me, like, it was such an insult to the actor. And then I remember like they even got out the fact that, oh, they got permission from his family or whatnot. But then I was like, if you see the kind of work that he's done, he was like one of the finest actors of our time when you really think about it, on the level of Marlon Brando and like whatnot.
Cushing was so ubiquitous on British television in the early 50s. So this is like when people saw him in Dracula or Horror of Dracula in 58. This is why this portrayal, him being in the movie, was so important. He was so ubiquitous on British television that early British television, the slang for it was, it's Peter Cushing with knobs. That's my English stepmom said that her mother used to say, they called us Peter Cushing with knobs, because he was in so many like adaptations of theatrical things on television. He was really, really a well-known actor. And I found it kind of touching that the only reason that both of them did Dracula AD 1972 was they wanted to work together again. They hadn't worked together in years on a Dracula film, and they wanted to do it. And Christopher Lee said, and we put up with a lot of shitty dialogue to do it. Mm-hmm. But they wanted to work together because they were close friends, and Peter Cushing's wife had died in like 71, somewhere in there. And
he got really depressed. I remember
it destroyed him. Yeah. I really think that he died of heartbreak. And the sad thing to me, as a person of faith, is that Peter Cushing went to a lot of different religious denominations because he was so cut up by his wife.
Yeah.
It's like, what is death? What does this mean? What happens? What do you think? What? And none of them wanted to talk to him honestly about death. They just wanted to give him religious platitudes. So he ended up going to spiritual mediums, and people tried to contact their spirit and this and that. But yeah, people who are really grieving and want to talk about death, they need to talk about death, like the real McCoy.
Yeah.
And that's another thing about our society. We just don't want to be honest. We don't want to be honest about death. Yeah, that's a sidebar, but it's one reason that Cushing has a soft place in my heart.
And he's mentioned that like so many times. There are like articles on him. It's like he was questioning his own existence after the death of his wife, and he kept himself busy by acting and by doing a lot of the stuff that he was doing. And I think Lee took charge of of things, of his emotional needs. I think they spent a lot of time together after Cushing's wife passed away, from what I see, because I do see like more pictures of them when Peter Cushing was older than I see pictures of them when they were younger. They were just like these two twin flames kind of like individuals who were just like sort of there for each other throughout like in all times. And look at the odds. Like you have Cushing as Van Helsing, and then Lee as Dracula, and then Cushing as Frankenstein, and Lee as Frankenstein's monster, and then Cushing again in the Mummy movie, and Lee playing the Mummy.
Yeah.
They were just both there. So it's like, they were just like, twin flames, as I would like to put it in a movie context. The second film, it starts where the first film ends. So that was really cool to see, because this is the official sequel of Horror of Dracula, but I saw this in the end, and I saw the rest of the movies like way before that, even like the Risen from the Grave
Oh.
movie and like stuff like that. And I'm like,
Now,
well,
do you mean you're talking about Brides of Dracula?
no, I was talking about the Prince of Darkness.
You saw Prince of Darkness last.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so but you loved it. You sounds like you liked it best.
I liked it better. I thought it was one of the better movies, definitely. I liked, but then there was Prince of Darkness, and then there was Risen from the Grave, which was absolutely phenomenal. Yeah,
I'm gonna argue for Risen from the Grave.
yeah.
I would put Risen from the Grave right up there with the original and Prince of Darkness, maybe a notch above because of Ewan Hooper's portrayal of that priest. And the actress
Oh yeah.
the prostitute. Her first name was Beverly.
Uh-huh.
I looked up her name and now I've forgotten. The one who had to hide the bites,
Uh-huh.
Those were such strong performances. And that stuff with the cross at the end at the castle.
Yeah.
That was a really strong film.
That was iconic. And I think that's when I realized, oh, there's a whole chronological order to these movies, because I saw Taste the Blood of Dracula before this. So
Yeah.
I did not know. I see Taste of Blood Dracula. I'm like, it starts with a salesman trying to sell some stuff, and then he gets like laid off and like kicked out of a carriage or whatnot, and then just boom, just Dracula starts shouting, and then it was a haunting. Definitely, I would say the first 10 minutes of Taste of Blood of Dracula are like so haunting. They stay with you for like the rest of your mortal existence.
That's
But
strong. That's good.
I mean, definitely. But then I was just like, okay, so where's this coming from? Then I saw like the Risen from the Grave movie, and I'm like, oh, okay, so this was where that movie started, the Taste of Blood movie. So there is an order to this stuff, and that's when I realized. I was like, okay, so I remember watching the Horror of Dracula. That was the very first film, so there must have been a sequel, like a direct sequel to that. Internet was like up and coming. They had like a limited amount of information on it. It's difficult to find stuff. Like it's not like today. You just watch stuff over Netflix.
Yeah, today you watch everything anytime, and I think it makes stuff have less value.
Yeah.
So way back when I was like, this is like 73, 74, when I was still in elementary school, I discovered Famous Monsters of Filmland magazine.
Uh-huh.
And in the back of it, you could order 8mm silent clips from the Universal horror films.
Oh.
And we had an 8mm projector because my dad took 8mm movies, as every dad did back then. So I ordered these things. You actually sent money, like you put the money in the envelope,
Uh-huh.
enclosed $250 or whatever. and it was I don't know, maybe it was like 1 minute or 2 minutes silent of Lugosi and Frankenstein and Chaney as the Phantom. But it was amazing to me to see these images thrown up on the wall because I had never seen them move before, and
Uh-huh.
that's something that a kid who's born today cannot imagine not having all of this at their beck and call anytime they want it, right?
If you have a really good filmmaker who maybe remakes these movies and then people are like intrigued, oh, let's go back and watch these movies again for whatever reason. But
So I say that the 58 Dracula,
uh-huh.
you can show that to just about anybody, and if they can get through it, they can get into it. Same
Yeah.
with Prince of Darkness, Dracula's Risen from the Grave. When you get into Scars of Dracula, Dracula 80, 1972, and
Yeah.
all that stuff, you need to be a little high to watch it. For me,
100%.
it's wine. I need wine and some friends around, so that those are movies that you're going to make comments on during it,
Yeah.
because there's just some moments that you've got to say, "Oh my god!" But the overall effect at the end is you'll be glad you watched it. So I
Yeah.
really encourage people not to say, "Oh, this is some old movie from the late '60s or from the
I have
'70s,"
a
and
yeah.
yeah.
I know. I definitely have a point to make. I showed these movies to a friend of mine, and he's really like one of those artsy filmmakers. And he's like, he see these movies, and it's like, this is not cinema. This is all garbage. And I'm like, whoa. So that's the point. It's like, this isn't too harsh of a time for movie buffs in general and for movies in general. It's like everything has to have some meaning. What we're talking about are films from a simpler time when people didn't really think about things as much as they do now. So,
No, that's true. And I mean, I did go to movies when I was a kid. I grew up with the movie theaters, and yeah, I can tell you that you went to the movies to escape your life, and you didn't expect to see some type of allegory for what was going on in the real world.
mhm.
No, and the rich. I'm surprised that your friend said that, because the richness of those Hammer films is that to me, it creates an entire world. Like, who lives in a world like that?
Yep.
That's lush and rich, and all of these crazy camera angles. Yeah, I'm really surprised.
And also, I feel like the closest you can get to like a real world reference or whatnot is like when they made the 1972 movie, the Dracula AD 1972 movie. And I think that was inspired by some kind of a real vampire incident that happened in London during those times. And then they said that they marketed the movie being that this is inspired from those events because they were like apparently real vampires that were running loose on the streets of London. And this was like a big deal back in the day for whatever reason. I don't know too much about.
I remember hearing a little after that, like this is like late '80s, early '90s, about something at a club scene in Europe where people were actually like believing they were really vampires
Yeah.
going out clubbing.
That's the closest you can get really to like these films having any kind of real world allegory or like any kind of reference. But we've already spoken about like Taste of Blood, Dracula, and Prison from the Grave because both the movies really, to sum it up, they both have the same plot. The more you think about it, it's like, there's a teenage girl or whatnot. She's seduced by Dracula, and the father lead figure comes in forefront and tries to save the girl. And there's also the girl's lover that the father does not like, which really is like both the movies have the same story.
And I think that these films were making a comment about the hypocrisy of religious leaders in some ways,
Yeah,
and the sort of like unthinking, dogmatic, because both of them have these really, really strong, the Monsignor, and then the I don't know what the guy was called, the monk or the really strict guy in the other one. But we don't catch that today because religion has faded completely,
yeah,
and so we don't have the strong idea of good and evil that
yeah.
people in '58 would have had, or even when I was a kid. And it does make the films less effectual if your worldview is, well, people do what they do, and there's not really any good or any evil.
Yeah.
It would take away from it if you came to it with that worldview.
Yeah, definitely. And I think this was the last of it. Because even when you talk about like Scars of Dracula or 1972 or like what's the movie that came, Satanic Rites? I think it was less about good versus evil, and it was just like they were doing whatever they wanted to do with these movies. But then I think Taste of Blood of Dracula was like that last good movie between like this like classic good versus evil kind of archetype and like that
I
classic story,
agree.
right?
And when Lee dies in these movies,
Mm.
oh my God, you can almost see like you wonder, is it regret that's on his face? Like he dies so pitifully.
He's like probably thinking, "Oh, not again."
Does he regret whatever choice he made that led him to have this great power at the cost of never dying?
Yeah,
And yeah, I think he's brilliant at bringing across that mixture of like ferocity, but also like the fear that Dracula may have. Like, shit, is this really going to go on forever?
but I think he's even
How many more women's throats can I rip out? Does he ever stop? Does it ever stop being a thrill for him? Does he ever get bored?
I
You
think he
know?
was just getting his paychecks. I think he was really enjoying the paychecks because I don't think any other, he would be motivated to do it otherwise because he was definitely not having a good time with the movies.
Oh, I
Okay.
meant Dracula, and you meant Christopher Lee.
Okay.
Maybe the same thing.
Maybe the same thing. But I feel like Scars of Dracula was just like, I don't even think there's much to really talk about because it kind of has the same story. It's Christopher Lee considers this to be the best performance of his, but the movie is really blank. It's like really like just like there's nothing much happening. I was not really excited for this one after watching it. I was excited to watch it, but then when I saw it, I'm like, okay, this is like the weakest movie in the whole bunch, even weaker than the Satanic Rites movie.
I agree, and I understand, and I sympathize and empathize with what he's saying. Like, this was one of my stronger performances, but it's in a movie that's crap.
Yeah.
I've done that so many times. So, movies that really, it's not a good movie, but I think, yeah, but I'm really proud of my work, but nobody cares because they just say, oh, the movie sucks.
Yeah.
I guess it's like being with an old friend and you're just like, okay, I get to be with you, and that's cool. Although we're having kind of a so-so time. That's the
Yeah.
way it feels.
Yeah, but
And again, it's weird. Like kids now who are used to seeing everything, they might watch 5 seconds of it, not be into it, and boom, they're gone. But when you went to the movie theater, you did have to have a relationship with these actors,
yeah,
and so you were in it. You were sitting in the dark with them for hour and a half.
yeah.
So you were in it for the good and the bad, kind of like a marriage.
I don't know if you remember the introduction to the movie. You literally have like some random bat with blood on his mouth, and he drops blood on Dracula's dead corpse, and he just kind of.
That's right.
There's no ritualistic aspect involved here, and there's no like like calling the devil and all that jazz like they do in like the AD 1972 movie. And it's like you really see like Hammer is super tired of making these movies by that time. It's like oh they want something new to do to be done in this universe. Otherwise, I think because you had Exorcist and you had the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and the Halloweens and everything because American cinema was like really catching up with what they were doing at that point. People wanted to watch these kind of movies, not like, the same Dracula dying and getting resurrected again and dying and getting resurrected. So it's like you saw that Hammer is really fed up. And I think the next two movies, what's that movie? AD 1972 and Satanic Rites were like responses to that. It's like, okay, you want to see that newness in our universe,
Yes,
you know?
I've read reviews from the time, like in 1970, AD 1972, that said that the kids in that were really, really irritating. The critics were so hard on them. But now, looking back, it's easier to watch, I think, because it's kind of quaint.
Honestly, though, I did not enjoy any of the movies after Taste of Blood of Dracula. Even as a kid watching like just things for the fun of it, it did not intrigue me or like excite my imagination.
That's the difference, right? That's the difference is between something you can sit around with your buddies and laugh at
Yeah.
or something that sticks with you. And like you said at the beginning, the first, what was it? The first 10 minutes of what you said it will stick with you forever.
Taste of Blood of Dracula.
You said it will be with you your whole mortal
Or for my
existence.
whole moral existence, yes, 100%.
That's strong, man. That's the power of film.
But that's the last, really, when you think about it. It's like that's when it was the Dracula films were at their peak. So you see, you had these two remaining movies, and they're both set in the modern times. And we've spoken about Dracula AD 1972 quite often, and throughout this conversation, but we never touched up upon the Satanic Rites part, which is like I did not know it's a direct sequel. Firstly, I did not know it's a direct sequel to the first film. But then you see Dracula just randomly pops up in this movie, and then you don't give any context and like how was he resurrected, or like the kind of rituals or anything like that. How did he come back? And like he's just kind of there. And you have the same
Yeah.
character, the descendant of Van Helsing, or like it's like Peter Cushing from the AD 1972 movie and everything. But then it's all the same. But then the Jessica Van Helsing character is like played by a different actress. So that was all like different. So I did not know if it was like a sequel to that movie, but then now that I look back at it, I'm like, okay, it's a bad movie. It's a bad sequel. No wonder Hammer just stopped making these movies, after a point.
But Cushing was really good in that one. That was a really, really strong performance.
Yeah.
But yeah, and after that, it probably should have stopped. You can't just keep milking it,
Yeah.
But I would encourage like people who say, just they're short films, right? They're not like crazy long. I don't know how long the 58 is, hour and a half, something.
Hour and a half, yeah.
Okay, so I would say just commit to it. Just say, I'm going to turn it on and I'm not going to hit pause and I'm not going to hit stop. I'm going to watch it. I'm just the same way you would say, I'm going to walk on the treadmill for an hour this morning. I'm just going to freaking do it. And if you do that, dim the room. Don't go on any more other tabs. Try to get a theatrical experience.
Yeah.
I think you'll be sucked into it. Like the opening shot of the gargoyle.
Yeah.
That movie, to me, it was haunting because it brought out like the loneliness of the English countryside.
Yeah.
The almost hauntedness of the English countryside because they
Which
didn't
one?
make any.
Which one?
The beginning, the 58. They
This
didn't make
movie.
any,
Oh yeah. 100%.
Yeah, it's the landscape itself seems haunted,
Yeah.
chilled, unforgiving, and that stuck with me for years. So in the wintertime, whenever I would see a winter landscape, I would think of, it would feel like there were things hiding in this barren winter landscape. There's an old British hymn, in the bleak midwinter, frosty wind made moan, earth stood hard as iron, water like a stone. So that's what those opening shots remind me of, like the bleakness of that environment that Dracula lived in.
Yeah. But I do feel like with alcohol, you would have a much better experience, especially if you're an adult and not a kid watching these. Because I mean,
I'm with you, but don't get totally blitzed. Just like get happy, right? Just kind of like, don't go all the way.
Yeah.
Just like, for me, it's one glass of wine. I'm good. I'm happy. More than that, I'm silly, and I can't really get into it. But yeah, that would be a one glass of wine experience for me. Although I don't need it. I don't need it for that one, but I do need it for the later ones.
In retrospect, though, all these movies, in comparison to the kind of movies they're making today and the kind of sequels they're making today, I mean, I would even go to the length of comparing Gladiator 2 with Dracula AD 1972. Because Gladiator 2 was really boring, honestly. It's like it was just there, it's like for whatever reason. I feel like there's more creativity in in the Dracula movies, even the bad ones, than the kind of movies they're making today. So I would say for the fun of it, just see something that you haven't seen before, You might not enjoy it thoroughly, but then you'll have fun with it.
And that's the thing, like that's almost gone from our culture. You might not enjoy it thoroughly, but you might get something from it that'll stick with you. We're not really into that anymore. We're like, I need to know that I will enjoy it 110%.
Yeah.
Rather than you might not be totally into it, but at the end you might be really glad you watched it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cinema. That's the magic of cinema, and these movies are the magic of cinema.
Absolutely. Just like us, right? we all have, irrespective of our imperfections, we're all amazing, strange, wonderful, tragic creatures, kind of like Dracula.